In its work, Being and Nothingness, a French philosopher argues the difference from anguish and the phenomenon of fear. Fear is in regard to external things, whereas anguish is in regard to internal facing of oneself. Anguish is an inner mode of being which stands in opposition to one's past and future, but fear is in response to something beyond oneself. However, the argument can be made that fear and anguish are not mutually exclusive from one another. Here we see Elijah's internal struggle with his fears and his doubts, his private withdrawal into the wilderness. But this chapter is not only about the prophet, but it's also about a God who meets Elijah and responds to Elijah in the particulars of his situation, providing for his needs and ultimately redirecting him. And while Elijah is in fear for his life because of the threats of Jezebel, he is also in anguish regarding the prophecy he is living within, especially as a lone ranger. Externally and internally, he is wrestling with the thoughts and the ramifications of death. Death as a literal expectancy, but also death as a prophet. All that he has ever known and called to be, anguish and fear, it all resembles death for Elijah. Because the mind has already determined his death and his future, he runs to the wilderness and pleads for his death. But we know things happen in the wilderness. The wilderness is a reminder of God rescuing people of Israel out of bondage, but also the place that God had left them to die, they thought. It was the place where they sinned and rebelled, but also the place they learned to trust and believe in God again. The wilderness in this passage serves as a symbol of having one foot in the past and another foot in the future of what is to come, what has happened, and what is nearing. We've all been in the wilderness before. Barbara Brown Taylor writes about the wilderness exam, and she states, "It would be a mistake for me to try to describe your wilderness exam. Only you can do that because only you know what devils have your number, which will call you. What kind of bribes they have and they will use. All I know for sure is that a voluntary trip to the wilderness is a great way to practice getting free of those devils. Not only because it's where you lose your appetite for things that cannot save you, but also because it's where you learn to trust the Spirit which led you there and leads you out again, ready to worship the Lord your God and serve no other all the days of your life." Here in the wilderness, Elijah knows his devils, but feels they will overtake him. So he sits down under a solitary broom tree. He asks that he might die, that it's enough now, O Lord, take my life, for I am no better than my ancestors. My friends, if you are here today and you feel your life does not matter, if you are having thoughts much like Elijah, wrestling with the thought of death, please know you are not alone, and we are here with you together to walk a path and a journey. You are loved, that even where you are, the love of God can meet you there, that we are with you. Come and talk to any of us, that we want to walk the journey with you. Elijah says, "Take my life, for I am no better than my ancestors." The ancestors have been explained in at least two ways. One, as his dead ancestors whom he wished to join with. But the second is the ancestors are the prophetic vocation, specifically Moses, who also complained in the wilderness and asked the Lord if he could die. And it was not granted to Moses, and it was not granted to Elijah. Rather, he sleeps and eats, sleeps and eats, sleeps and eats 40 days he eats and sleeps and repeats, and an angel reminds him of this is necessary because if you do not, you will not sustain the journey ahead. If you do not, you cannot find the necessary strength to overcome the internal and the external, the anguish and the fear. To work yourself to the bone until you have nothing left in you has been quoted so much, people probably think it's in the American Constitution. But fatigue and exhaustion and being overwhelmed is a real and affects who we are as human beings and people of faith. It's not until he has sustenance and rest and serenity that God approaches him and asks, what in the world are you doing here, Elijah? And he makes his way through this speech to God, all the things that I have done, the life I have lived, and yet they are after me with the threat of death. That I am alone, I am by myself. And through the fear, the anguish, Elijah was not at a state to hear God, nor actually able to specifically pinpoint God in that state, because God was not found in the wind. God was not found in the earthquake. God was not in the chaos where Elijah expected to find God in. God was not in the same chaotic space. God was not in the fire burning with rage, nor was God in any of the places Elijah expected to find God, but God was in the silence. It's a good lesson here of eat, sleep, and be quiet. Naps are important for us. But when we are responding so much to the voices internally and externally, you can't hear God. And when you expect God to react in the same way as you, I cannot say always, but most times God has a different answer and is moving us to a different place. That all of us are here today because God has used some aspects of our lives to work and to mold us into hopefully a position of faith and a perspective like no one else could ever have or done. It's necessary. The wilderness is necessary. The rest is necessary. The sustenance of bread and wine is necessary. Actively listening to God is necessary. Sitting with God in the silence is necessary. And I will also add, when you think that you're alone, the only prophet left, the only one securing justice, the only one doing right by God, the only one honoring God, the only one living holy and righteous and faithfully. When it seems like you are all alone, know that you're not. That someone else will reach out their hand to you and remind you that you are on this ride together. I remember the day like it was yesterday. We waited in line, slowly walking aboard the plane, and it was hot. Though the air vents were open, it was nothing but hot air coming out of them. And I found my seat a perfect window seat. And even though the stewardess said over and over, this is a full flight, in my mind I kept thinking, hopefully this won't be a full flight and no one will sit next to me. And then all of a sudden they locked eyes with me. And I knew they were going to be my seatmates. It was a mother and son. The son was supposedly around the age 12, but he was about 6 feet tall. And without them telling me, I could really understand, and I could notice that it was going to be his first flight. While we were waiting for others to get in their seats and situated, the mother whispered to me, "Would you mind raising the window shade? It's his first flight, and he would love to see out the window. Now, we all know that if you sit in the window seat, you get to determine if the shade is up or down. So I was quite annoyed, but I went ahead and did it anyway. He took out his small stuffed animal and got his K-pop ready to listen to. His mom reached out her hand for his, but he shook his head that he didn't need it. I watched them together as they said a prayer for traveling mercies. And it seemed like their amen was the thing to get the plane to moving backwards. And as takeoff began, I heard a and not of excitement, but frantically he looked around, wondering why no one else was nervous as he. And he slowly took his mother's hand and he looked at me, and with eyes together, we said, "It's going to be okay." As he slept, I thought about my first flight. I was a sophomore in high school, and I had another window seat. But this time, I was sitting next to two Italian models. My ears were in so much pain and trying to be manly and not cry because, trying to impress the two Italian models. I began to break down crying from the pain happening. And she reached over and grabbed my hand and said, "It's going to be okay." I don't know what it is about another hand reached out that subsides fears for us. Did you notice the last part in the chapter that God sends Elijah out to go to Damascus to anoint another group of people, to remind him that his work is not just of himself, but his work is filled with a community of others that are wanting to do the justice and the righteousness and the love and the grace and the mercy just as he, that he is not alone in fulfilling this work, that though there is fear, though there is anxiety, though there is anguish, though there is pain, though there is the threat of death, he is not alone, that community is surrounding him and being with him hand in hand, that they go out together to be anointed into the mission of God. Hand in hand, my friends, we go out into this world to the mission of God. Hand in hand, my friends, we go out into this world as faithful beings. Hand in hand, even right here and now, the voice and the love of God can be shared with us. Hand in hand, no matter what is happening around us, we are reminded of a God that is filled with grace and love and mercy that sustains us day in and day out. Hand in hand. Together, we are not alone. No matter what the fear says. No matter what is happening in the world, and yes, the pain of yesterday hits hard for all of us. As the bombs drop, we still believe in a work of peace, and a work of God. Together, we do not give up because of the fear, but hand in hand, we walk together. Amen.